I'd like to cover a few items for the beanbag toss project. One of the things that you'll find are several PDF files, and those PDF files are extremely important. I would print out all of them, and the reason you will is because you're going to be referring to those as you go through each of the designs. So the first complete direction file is extremely well written. There are a couple of things I want to cover with you though. If you have directional fabric, I would buy additional yardage. And the reason I would do that, depending on the size of the print and the number of inches between repeats, you may want to have more of a pattern show up when you're cutting this. So I typically buy an extra half yard if I have a directional design. And by that, I mean, if you look at this is a side triangle. You can see obviously that this has a directional print. If this was cut in the other direction, the cactus would be upside down. The next thing that I want to cover is that I do use the tape to tape down pieces as I'm cutting with my digital cutter. I do not have the R&K product, however I use one that I have on hand. So make sure that you pick up the tape when you buy your supplies. All of the supplies that you see here, you will want to have them, and they serve a purpose. And when you finish your design, you're going to be so pleased with the outcome. The next thing is if you are fusing the back of your fabric, which I typically do whenever I have any applique, you will want to pick up the foolproof repositionable webbing. Now this is an embellished product. I didn't have it on hand, so I use my Quilter Select I can't even pronounce it, Aptly Web Plus. This is a product designed by Alex Anderson. You retain a nice soft hand. It is not repositionable, however, so I would try out the embellished foolproof repositionable webbing because that becomes helpful. If you can reposition something and place it down, you don't necessarily have to fuse it in place before you embroider. But you will want to fuse it because you have the beautiful iridescent mylar that's on the top. Let's go ahead and continue. In these instructions, she's going to show you how many of each design you need to stitch out. So you might think this is number 1, this is number 2. No, this means you need to stitch out 2 of this design. You need 3 of this design and 1 of this particular design. She also shows you what the process is like in order to tack down your design, to cover it with the mylar, to stitch out the stitches for the mylar, and then she'll also cover how to stitch out your triangles. Make sure you read that completely so that you understand her instructions. I did not realize that this was in my file, so I got to use my seam ripper and start this again. And it was my mistake. It was not a problem with the instructions. It was a problem with me not reading thoroughly. And you'll notice that what happens is there'll be a final stitch out, and that final stitch out you're going to trim 1/4 of an inch away. So make sure you read all the instructions and then look at your color charts. So each design is going to have a file that includes what the design looks like and the position of that design in the hoop. In the case of mine, this actually stitched out in this direction in my hoop. I did use my 10 5/8 by 10 5/8 hoop, but if you look at the instructions that come with the design, you will notice thread colors. Now, these thread colors are not necessarily the ones that I use. These are the steps, and again, they're very thorough. Make sure that you look at the design on your machine. If you're like me and you have a luminaire, you might want to go out to layout, go to the plus minus, and look at each one of those designs, and as you're going through this, and think about how you process that particular design. So as we look at this, and again, you can see the beautiful mylar and the iridescent sheen, and you can see that on the wings of the bee, you get a beautiful stitch out.